James Mill, 1773 to 1836, was a Scottish historian, philosopher, and economist who left an indelible mark on political thought, utilitarian philosophy, and education. A towering intellectual of his time, he was an advocate for rationalism, democracy, and social reform, deeply influencing both governance and philosophy. However, his legacy is one of both brilliance and controversy, particularly in his approach to education and human development. Mill's life provides key lessons in discipline, governance, education, and the limitations of a rigidly rationalist worldview. His story is one of progress and paradox, offering valuable insights into both the power and pitfalls of intellectual rigor and systemic control. 1. The transformative power of education. One of James Mill's most profound contributions to intellectual life was his belief in the transformative power of education. He was convinced that knowledge could elevate individuals and society, helping them break free from ignorance, superstition, and oppressive traditions. This belief shaped his most famous educational experiment, his son, John Stuart Mill. Mill's educational philosophy was extreme. He personally oversaw his son's education from infancy, designing a rigorous curriculum that included Greek by the age of 3, Latin at 8, and advanced logic, economics, and philosophy well before adolescence. His method proved effective in producing an intellectual prodigy, but it also demonstrated the dangers of excessive pressure, as John Stuart Mill later suffered a nervous breakdown in his 20s. Furthermore, Mill's approach prioritized intellectual development over emotional and social well-being. His son later recounted the emotional toll of this rigid upbringing, describing how he struggled with depression and lacked the ability to connect with emotions naturally. This example underscores the risk of treating education as a purely intellectual endeavor while neglecting emotional intelligence and creativity. Lesson: education is a powerful tool, but it must be balanced. Mill's dedication to learning teaches us that education can be a vehicle for societal progress and individual excellence. However, his rigid, high-pressure approach also highlights the need for balance. Education should not be so rigorous that it stifles emotional development and creativity. True learning fosters curiosity, emotional growth, and adaptability, not just intellectual achievement. 2. Rationalism as a guiding principle, and its limits. Mill was a staunch advocate of rationalism, believing that human progress depended on reason and logic rather than tradition and emotion. His writings, particularly his work in utilitarian philosophy alongside Jeremy Bentham, emphasized maximizing happiness through rational governance and ethical decision-making. However, while rationality is a powerful tool for decision-making, Mill's life shows the dangers of over-reliance on logic at the expense of human emotions. His educational methods, his political theories, and his views on governance often dismissed the emotional and psychological complexities of individuals. He was convinced that a logical framework could solve most societal issues, yet he underestimated the role of human instincts, tradition, and emotions in shaping societies. The danger of extreme rationalism is that it can become cold, detached, and in some cases, oppressive. His strict rationalist perspective often led to a dismissal of the nuanced, irrational, and deeply personal aspects of human existence. Rationality should serve as a guide, not as an absolute force that disregards emotional and cultural intricacies. Lesson: balance rational thought with human emotion. Mill's intellectual rigor reminds us of the power of logical reasoning. However, his personal life, and his son's later critiques, illustrate the need to temper reason with empathy and emotional intelligence. True wisdom comes from balancing logic with an understanding of human nature, ensuring that rationality does not become a form of dogma. 3. The role of government in human progress. Mill believed in the necessity of strong governance to ensure societal progress. His views on political economy and democracy emphasized rational administration over traditional rule. He was a proponent of democratic representation, though he also believed that governance should be left to the most capable individuals rather than being purely populist. He was instrumental in shaping British colonial policy, particularly in India, through his work The History of British India, 1817. While he criticized the inefficiencies of Indian governance, his views reflected a Eurocentric perspective, often justifying British intervention in the name of civilizational progress. This belief in rational governance as a means to uplift societies often led to the imposition of foreign rule, disregarding local customs and traditions. This raises an important question: is governance best determined by intellectual elites, or should it emerge from the collective will of the people? Mill's belief in structured governance teaches us the importance of rational decision-making in politics, yet his rigid approach serves as a cautionary tale about imposing governance without cultural and historical sensitivity. Lesson: governance should prioritize justice and rationality, but avoid authoritarianism. Mill's work teaches us that governance should be rooted in justice, rationality, and fairness. However, policymakers must also respect cultural traditions and the voices of those they govern. Progress should not come at the expense of self-determination and cultural identity. 4. Hard work and discipline as the foundation of success. Mill's life was marked by intense discipline. He was not born into wealth but achieved intellectual prominence through sheer dedication and perseverance. He juggled multiple roles: philosopher, historian, economist, and administrator, producing extensive writings on politics, philosophy, and economics. His work ethic was remarkable. Despite limited financial resources, he dedicated himself to intellectual pursuits, writing prolifically while also working for the East India Company. His commitment to disciplined study and labor set an example for self-made success, demonstrating that knowledge and perseverance can overcome socio-economic barriers. However, an extreme focus on work and intellectual rigor can come at a personal cost. Mill's life was defined by relentless toil, leaving little room for leisure, emotional reflection, or personal relationships. While discipline and hard work are vital for success, they must be tempered with rest, creativity, and human connection. Lesson: success requires discipline and perseverance. Mill's life underscores the value of relentless hard work. His rise from modest beginnings to intellectual prominence serves as a reminder that discipline, persistence, and focus can yield great achievements. However, success should not come at the expense of personal well-being. A well-rounded life requires balancing ambition with relaxation, personal fulfillment, and social engagement. 5. The ethics of utilitarianism, when the greater good comes at a cost. Mill was a key figure in utilitarian philosophy, which argues that the best action is the one that maximizes overall happiness. He saw this as the foundation of ethics, advocating for policies that prioritize the greatest good for the greatest number. However, this philosophy has its ethical dilemmas. Utilitarianism can justify actions that sacrifice the well-being of individuals or minority groups if they serve the majority's happiness. For example, policies that improve society as a whole but restrict personal freedoms can be defended under utilitarian logic. This lesson reminds us that while utilitarian principles can guide ethical decision-making, they must be balanced with respect for individual rights and justice. Ethics isn't just about numbers, it's about humanity. 6. The dangers of intellectual elitism, knowledge without humility. Mill believed that governance should be led by the most knowledgeable individuals rather than the general public. While expertise in leadership is valuable, his view often leaned toward intellectual elitism, where the educated few were seen as superior decision-makers. The risk of this mindset is that it can alienate and dismiss the perspectives of ordinary people, leading to policies that, while rational on paper, fail to address the real needs of society. True progress requires wisdom, not just intelligence. Leaders should listen as much as they lecture. 7. Free speech and its boundaries. Where do we draw the line? James Mill was a strong advocate for free speech, believing that open discourse led to social progress. His influence can be seen in his son John Stuart Mill's famous defense of liberty. However, Mill himself sometimes contradicted this ideal, supporting strict social controls in governance. He believed that reason should guide speech, but what happens when voices challenge authority? This lesson highlights the tension between free expression and the desire for rational control. True progress comes from tolerating dissent, even when it's inconvenient. 8. Colonial justifications and ethical blind spots. When progress becomes oppression. Mill's work on the history of British India reflected a belief in European superiority. He argued that British rule was necessary to civilize India, overlooking the complexities and richness of indigenous governance. This lesson teaches us that even the most intellectual minds can have ethical blind spots. Progress cannot be imposed, it must emerge from within cultures and communities. True reform respects the agency of those it seeks to help. 9. The role of family and emotional growth. Intelligence without emotional intelligence. Mill's rigorous education of his son John Stuart Mill created a prodigy, but it also led to emotional repression and eventual burnout. His approach prioritized intellect over emotional well-being, leading his son to later reflect on the lack of joy in his upbringing. The lesson here is clear: knowledge without emotional intelligence can be a burden. Personal growth is not just about intellect but also about human connection, emotional resilience, and the ability to experience life fully. 10. Reform with flexibility. The danger of rigid thinking. Mill was a passionate reformer, advocating for changes in governance, education, and society. However, his strict adherence to rationalism sometimes made his views inflexible. He underestimated the importance of cultural and emotional factors in shaping societies. True reform requires adaptability. While logic and structure are important, change must also be guided by empathy and an understanding of human nature. A rigid framework can crumble under pressure, but a flexible approach can evolve and endure. Conclusion: the dual legacy of James Mill. James Mill's life offers a powerful lesson in the pursuit of knowledge, discipline, and reform. His contributions to utilitarianism, education, governance, and political thought continue to influence modern discussions on ethics, leadership, and societal progress. However, his legacy is also a cautionary tale about the dangers of intellectual elitism, emotional neglect, and rigid rationalism. Mill's belief in reason as the supreme guide to human progress shaped his worldview, yet it also revealed the limitations of pure logic when applied without empathy. His strict educational methods produced brilliance but at the cost of emotional well-being. His advocacy for rational governance contributed to progressive reforms but also justified colonial domination. His commitment to utilitarianism promoted fairness but sometimes ignored the rights of individuals in favor of the majority. Ultimately, the key lesson from Mill's life is balance, between logic and emotion, reform and tradition, authority and freedom. Progress is not achieved through rigid frameworks alone but through adaptability, empathy, and a deep understanding of human nature. His successes and shortcomings remind us that wisdom is not just about intelligence but about knowing when to apply reason and when to listen to the heart. His life challenges us to think critically, seek knowledge, and pursue reform, but always with humility, compassion, and an awareness of the complexities of human existence.